Certainly I found the presentations very interesting, and I know quite a few of you have stayed on for a long lunchtime discussion, which is great. Just shows the sort of the enthusiasm out there for the topic. So I'm now going to hand over to Rachel Hadley Leonard. I'm not going to introduce Rachel, I'll leave her to do that herself. Rachel is an expert in all things to do with independent schools, from admissions, marketing and development. She really has got experience and expertise in all three of those areas, which I think is quite a rare find. Asking Rachel to speak on this programme was a given. It was more, what topic should we get her to speak on, because she is so good on so many topics. So today, I thought we'd get her to speak on engaging parents and alumni in a, well, originally a post-COVID world, but sadly, a COVID world, because we're not where we perhaps hoped we would have been today on February the 11th. So without further ado, I'd like to hand over to Rachel.
Thanks so much, Alicia, and thank you for your kind words. I'm not sure they're all true, but thank you anyway. So yes, when Alicia first asked me to speak, it was months ago when we were thinking, you know, let's talk about engaging parents post-COVID. Who could have ever imagined we would still be here now? Sorry, I say parents, I should have said parents and alumni, because I will be talking about both. But we're still here, we're still in the thick of it. And although there are promises on the horizon, we don't know if they're empty promises or half promises, and who knows, you know, with another winter of 21, where we'll be then. Let's try and stay positive, but it's definitely mid-COVID, not post-COVID. Just a very quick little bit about me. So I've spent over 30 years of my life in education, most of it in the independent sector, but some of it in the maintained sector. I had a sort of simultaneous career in marketing, in industry, with the likes of John Lewis Partnership, etc. And likewise fundraising. I've done charitable fundraising. And about probably 12 years ago, I decided to merge the two together and moved from my first career, which was teaching, where I was a head of department, senior leader, into marketing and fundraising for schools. And then I joined AMCIS as a director. That's where I met Alicia, and went on to be co-chair of that organisation. So I was with them for 7 years. So at the moment, now permanently, I'm a consultant, and I work with schools all over the UK and Europe, helping them with their admissions, marketing and development, the MAD team, as I like to call them. It's not too bad a description either. I'm also a professional mentor. I am a judge for the TES Independent School Awards and a judge for Inspired Marketing and Fundraising. And just because I like to be a busy lady, I'm also a governor at Lichfield Cathedral School. So as Alicia knows, I like to keep busy. So that's a little bit about me. So what we'll be looking at today and talking about in this very short presentation, I think I've only got 30 minutes and then some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll have a brief look at the national context, although I'm very grateful to Jonathan Parks for those of you who were able to see his talk this morning. And it was really interesting to hear his updates. I was frantically scribbling, taking down notes and screenshotting things. But we'll have a little bit of a look at the national context, then the effect of the pandemic on stakeholder relations, using research to deliver what parents and alumni want, creating ambassadors from the parent body, quite a new idea in terms of an ambassador program, and a little bit about alumni engagement, and then a couple of case studies of engaging initiatives. I can't promise you rocket science here, and I can't promise you anything that's going to turn your head completely, but what I hope is that there are a few ideas, just reflection really, and maybe confirmation of what you're already doing, and then maybe a couple of ideas that you haven't already thought of. So looking at the national context, there's a lot of purple, by the way, in my slides. Purple and black are my brand, or my logo, if you like. So, oh, I've got to move this across, otherwise I won't be able to see. Okay, so if we can cast our minds back to before February 2020, which seems about 100 years ago now, the independent sector was already struggling from quite a few different arrows. Brexit and the uncertainty around that, and the effects of that, the economic downturn generally. Most independent schools will absolutely be into consultation about over teachers' pensions and the huge increase in costs on their costs, the increase in costs. The threat of VAT on fees, which still hangs over us, and I'm not sure that that's going to go away, that threat. Whether it will ever be implemented, I don't know. We've seen we saw an increased request for fee assistance and bursary requests, increased competition from state schools upping their game to academy trusts, free schools, mergers in particular. There were quite a few mergers going on, but there were also some independent school closures. I know Jonathan was talking about that earlier, in excess of 30, I think we are now just in the last year. And a decline in numbers in some areas and types, particularly in the smaller schools and the prep schools. There's been a decline in numbers. So as if that wasn't enough, then came COVID-19 with all its new challenges. So you will be only too familiar with these challenges, such as online teaching, etc. I won't read through that, but really it was the perfect storm back in February 2020. And it was hard to think of anything else that could have gone wrong, really, or could have thrown a challenge. I don't want to be all doom and gloom, and I think some of these challenges, you know, for every one side of the coin, there's a flip. And I think some of these challenges have presented schools with a real opportunity to shine, and more of that later. But I think some schools have really, really come good out of this situation. And as Jonathan was saying earlier, you know, there has been an increase in inquiries in many schools. As Julie Robinson said recently, Julie obviously speaks for the ISC. You know, we know from past experience that independent schools are highly adaptable to change in the market. And then she talks about the fantastic response to switching to online learning. And again, I was really interested to see Jonathan's stats on that in terms of the survey about online learning. But I think it's generally fair to say that the response from schools was quick and it was very positive, and perhaps we came out very well over our counterparts in that respect. But lots of optimism. So kind of what were the positives and negatives? I'm going to keep moving this little thing around. So the negatives, obviously, we've talked about for schools, the financial impact and whether they were able to help out their families or whether they were not able to do that as much as they wished. The well-being of students is a huge concern for schools and for families. And I think I'm right in saying for most schools, it was the major concern. Obviously, providing a continuing education, particularly for exam years, was important. But I think the well-being of students, for many heads, for many marketers, for many, certainly for all parents, was top of the agenda. But like I say, there were some positives as well. One of the things that I was really pleased to see as an effect of this pandemic, and I wrote about this subject actually in an article called I can't remember what it's called, the silver lining of the COVID cloud or something like that it was called. I wrote it a few months ago, but the article talked about how there'd been a real change in the clarity of the business side of the school. Probably everybody on this call today is only too aware of the business side of the school. But as you will also know, it's very hard getting that message across to every member of staff on the payroll and also to parents as well. I think parents don't always look at the business side of the school. I was doing a presentation yesterday and it was talking about what parents invest in a school. And I just have two images on that slide. One's an attaché case full of cash, hard-earned cash, and the other is a picture of a beautiful baby, because those are two huge investments that parents are making. So it's a very emotive thing for parents to invest their children in schools. And what I've seen that's positive that's come out of this pandemic and the school's response is that schools have been much more open, I think. The versus where in the past they've maybe kept things about the school's finances sort of hidden a little bit. Schools that I've talked to and I've worked with have really been much more open and candid and clear about their finances and about how the school operates as a business. And I think as well, academic staff, teaching staff and professional services staff have had a much better understanding. So for me, that's been a real plus. There's been clarity of content as well, you know, particularly in prep schools where little ones are learning alongside their mums or dads, and they are seeing everything that is being taught. So the clarity of content, and that was true right the way up to school, even when the parents aren't sitting there. And I think that clarity of business and clarity of content has really helped to build relationships between the school and their families. So I think that's a definite positive. I think children have developed their thinking skills and independent learning skills. Yes, there've been fantastic directives and provision and teacher-led sessions, but I think children have been fortunate enough to be able to develop their thinking and independent skills. And then I think finally schools have been able to take a real pride in what they've provided, which is what I've mentioned already. So what has been the effect of a pandemic on stakeholder relations? We've talked about those effects a lot already this morning, and I don't want to sort of cover old ground. And I know you'll all be familiar with these, but just to remind ourselves that we've seen a lot of increased personal difficulties. I don't know about you, but I don't think I know within my friendship groups, my professional groups, I'm not sure I know a family who hasn't had some personal difficulties in the last 12 months, whether that's come about through illness, through death, through furloughing, through redundancy, through children's mental health and well-being. Pretty much every family has had some personal difficulty, and I think that's been the case across the nation. Parents worry about the confidence in their homeschooling and the online teaching and learning provision, which we've talked about. Pupil well-being, obviously, right at the top of the agenda. And then, of course, the financial impact of COVID and the fee affordability as well. So we're dealing with parents and families who have got all these daily concerns, as well as doing everything that they were doing back in February 2020. So, oh, screen hasn't moved on. There we go. These were just Jonathan's slides from before, where we looked at, I'm not going to dwell on these because I know you've seen these this morning, but you know, the parent opinion of remote learning quality, and were parents happy to pay the fees. But I was really interested, and I'll spend some more time examining those later to look at those slides. But I think on the whole, parents were happy, but they were juggling many, many other concerns. So what are the solutions to those concerns? Well, I think the things that I can only talk about what I've seen with the schools I work with and schools that I know. I think the open door policy has been a really good solution to personal difficulties for families. I know, for example, at Wendy's School, who spoke earlier, at Abbots Hill School, they have had a fantastic programme of pastoral support and making sure they're constantly touching base and checking in with all the girls' families. And many schools have done that as well. But I think the schools that have done the best are the schools that have had that policy and an open door policy where families really feel they have got access. And I know in Tom's booklet, Cottesmore Connect, there are key, on one of the pages of that brochure, there are key people to contact. It's about being accessible to your families in their time of need. I think in terms of the second point, the solution is regular communication, outcome evidence, and really importantly, and somebody mentioned it earlier, future-proof learning. I think that was probably Wendy as well who mentioned it, or possibly Tom, both of you. But future-proof learning. We do not know, as I said at the beginning, that this is going to go away anytime soon. We may well be let out for the summer, as it were, and our children might be back in school on March the 8th. But who knows, we could be back here again in winter 21. And parents aren't stupid, they're aware of that. And I think what they want to see more than anything is outcome evidence of what you've done already, but also future-proof learning for the future. So how is your school going to keep this up? And what are you going to keep and what are you going to shed if ever we get back in face-to-face? And I know lots of schools, for example, won't ever go back to face-to-face parents' evenings. They will stick with virtual parents' evenings. As a parent myself and a former teacher myself, Nobody loves a parents' evening. You know, that schools have tried so many different methodologies, and it seems that everything has its challenges. But I think that future-proof, evidence of future-proof successful learning is really important. Pupil well-being, well, as ever, is just access to support, but letting parents and your families know about the support that's available. I don't think it's any good having the support there and saying, you know, we've got 2 counsellors or we've got a pastoral team. If you're removing, I was talking this morning to a school internationally, and I was talking about removing barriers, and that's what good marketing is all about. It's about removing barriers. So parents shouldn't have to jump through hoops. I'm a huge advocate of customer service. I was delivering some training on that this week, and everything that I kept banging on about, if you'll pardon the expression, was removing barriers for parents. And so you need to make that pupil wellbeing support as accessible as possible. And finally, you know, I think there needs to be financial clarity. I was talking about that just a minute ago. And I know many schools, if not all independent schools, have set up hardship funds. And it's been fantastic to see parents giving to that hardship fund. So, for example, where there have been fee reductions, parents have given back that reduction to the hardship fund. I think the key thing, if I can just pick up on one thing, to keep parents engaged throughout this pandemic and in the year coming, is communication. I don't think there's a more important tool than communication. And I know for a fact that the schools that have come out the best in this are the schools that have communicated the best with their families. So what kind of thing might that take? Well, regular formal weekly updates, of course, whether that's through a newsletter or a letter from the head, it doesn't really matter. I think some sort of formal, expected, calendared weekly update is really important, but also more informal updates, daily social updates, opportunities for engagement, opportunities for forums. We'll come on to that. I think there needs to be clarity in communication, and boy, if ever there was a really hard time to do that, it's now, because of course heads are pulling their hair out and marketers are pulling their hair out because the clarity from the government isn't perhaps what it could be. But you know, we have got to be clear in turn. It's fine to say that, you know, that there is confusion, or there isn't much clarity from up above, but I think we have to make sure our communications to parents are really clear. That would be my one top tip, really. I think the development of the community, the Dunkirk spirit people talk about, is really important. And I know that the speakers that have spoken so far have talked about this, and you know, community spirit is so important, and it is key to rally around each other, but for the school to facilitate that as well. When I was talking yesterday about what parents want to feel in terms of customer service, the 2 things that I think parents want to feel is listened to and valued. And I think particularly in this pandemic, schools need to create opportunities for 2-way communication. I don't think it's any good to just create opportunities for 1-way communication. It's got to be 2 ways. I couldn't find a nice picture to illustrate that, but I'm sure you know what I'm talking about. So inviting parents to come in, and not come in, but to get on Zoom and speak, to have forums and set up forums where parents can show and demonstrate and talk about how they're feeling and what it is they feel they need. So leading directly on from that, creating ambassadors from the parent body. I think schools have always had ambassadors. They've always had people who will champion their cause. It's the whole school gate, word at the school gate, word of mouth marketing, etc. But many schools are now taking a leaf out of our friends across the pond, and they are creating ambassador programs. And I think if you haven't already thought of this, it's a really good idea to start thinking about. There are just 3 examples there. I have no idea, by the way, as to why these links have come out in lime green. Absolutely no idea at all. Tried to change it, wouldn't let me. Sorry about that, unless you like lime green. So 3 very different schools there, one in the US, one in Spain, and one in the UK, that have ambassador programs, but it might be worth you looking at their programs. This is something that's really catching on, and I'm a real fan of ambassador programs. It just formalizes things a little bit more. Now, you could argue that all your parents should be ambassadors, and hopefully they are fans. If you haven't heard of a guy called Jeff Ram is a marketer come customer service comedian and speaker at conferences. Alicia will know who I'm talking about. But you know, he talks a lot about parents being fans and about customers being fans, and this is a way of turning fans into something a little bit more structured. But you know, we could talk for a whole webinar about that, but have a look at those links if you're interested. I said I'd talk about alumni engagement. I'm keeping an eye on the time. So important to, I always think of, I call it the cradle to grave. So, you know, you join, but you never leave, Hotel California kind of thing. You can check in, but you never leave. And I think that about all schools, whether they're prep schools or all through schools or just secondary schools. Alumni engagement is so important. I work a lot with development officers, and I've been director of development at a couple of schools. And so this is something I feel passionately about. When someone joins your school, whether they join at 3 or 5, at 7 or 11 or 16, they are signing up for a lifelong journey, or hopefully they are. So, you know, it's really important, particularly at this time, to look after them too. So what have been their challenges? Well, they have had a huge social and emotional impact. And I speak as parent of a 22 and a 20-year-old. And I know the social and emotional impact on their lives. And, you know, they keep in touch with their school, their alumni of their school, and they keep in touch. But there are all sorts of implications that have been highlighted at the moment through this pandemic for them. Career implications, particularly for the youngsters, the financial impact, perhaps for the slightly older alumni, and the decreasing networks. They're not getting the same networking chances that they were. So I think we as schools have to respond and understand and empathise with their challenges. So what's changed for our alumni? Well, the lack of networking, no on-site visits, loss of the human touch. That's the same for all of us. But there are some opportunities. So we can provide lots of one-to-one or small groups. We can have much more cost-effective events, and they're scalable as well. It doesn't have to be an event for 50, it can be an event for 2,000 all over the world. We can have much more dynamic content to those events. We can have a wider reach and greater engagement. And from a purely mercenary point of view, we can make online payments and donations for those people who've got up and running development offices. But so there are threats, but there are opportunities as well. I think the most important point is to know your audience, to know the demographics of your alumni community, to know what their needs are and their capabilities, and to adapt your engagement with them accordingly, because your 70-year-old alumni is not going to be acting the same way as your 17-year-old or 27-year-old alum. So really important to know and segregate your audience. You need to think about exciting your audience though. Alumni at any age, whether they be 20 or 87, they want to be excited and they want to be engaged. So you're not going to probably promote your bridge night to your 20-year-old. Maybe I'm making huge assumptions, maybe you will. Maybe you won't engage your 85-year-olds with a silent disco. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe you should. There's an opportunity that I hadn't thought of before, actually, that just popped into my head. But do think about what will excite and engage your audience and try and segregate them accordingly. And if you can, personalize the invitations for your alumni. Make it all about them by inviting questions beforehand, using breakout rooms, personalized follow-ups. Alumni love reminiscing, so ask them for their photographs. There are 100 ways that you could make this about them. Looking at both parents and alumni now, before we just quickly move on to some examples from the sector, I think using research is really important, and I've talked about two-way communication, and I really feel, as I mentioned earlier, that feeling valued and feeling heard is absolutely what our parents and our alumni want. So any opportunities that you've got to have focus groups, to have questionnaires, to have surveys. Find out what it is they want. Talk to them. Never assume. There's that great adage, I don't know if you've seen it, never assume. You write out the letters, you put 2 forward slashes in strategic places, and you get, never assume, because it makes an ass out of you and me. So never assume, always talk, always communicate. Through all these different methodologies: surveys, questionnaires, focus groups, online forums and chats. Here we go. I think the most important message, and I'm aware that I'm racing a little bit, but I think the most important message is to learn, to be constantly learning, and to reflect and review on what we've provided. And we all make mistakes, and we all come a cropper sometimes with things. But I think if we're reviewing and we're listening and then adapting as a result of those 2 things, I don't think we'll go far wrong. And I think our communities, our school communities, will be really sympathetic to our efforts as well, particularly if there's clarity. So I just want to finish off with some examples of engaging initiatives from the sector. I only just asked Tom about 30 minutes ago if I could use these slides, so I was hoping he wouldn't mind. But Tom mentioned his Cottesmore Connect, and that was one of the first examples I saw of a really good piece of literature, PDF on the website. I'm not sure, Tom, if you did it hard copy as well, but really great example about the school's response to virtual online learning, and how, how celebrating how well the school was doing, and making it clear to the parents. Merchant Taylor School, one of the schools I work with, has done a fantastic series of online careers events, 24 sessions over 400 attendees, but actually that was a couple of months ago now. They are way beyond that, but I know that's been a really successful programme for their alumni. Prince College, school I used to work at, some fantastic alumni engagement there with they call them VSOPs, very special old Prince Thorpians, fabulous people that I know very well. But they had, the school used to be a convent school, so they had, you can see a whole array of people of all sorts of different ages there, getting stuck in and enjoying themselves. Lady Eleanor Hollow's school, with a virtual reunion, and lots of schools have done that. Lots of virtual challenges. I'm just about to sign up to one myself, actually. I think I'm going to do the Walk the Alps to the Ocean challenge, because I do walk a lot. But this was kind of the first of that type of thing that New College Worcester did, where they did a virtual Land's End to John O'Groats challenge. And that's what I mean about something for everyone as well. That appeals to different audiences. Solihull School, another school I used to work for. Sounds like I've moved around ever such a lot. Ask the Experts Live, a series of sort of a lecture series where everybody can join in. And again, the reach is huge. Abbots Hill, Wendy's school there, keep in touch, asking the community to send in their remote learning stories and photographs. A fabulous initiative there. I mentioned at the beginning that I was a judge for Inspired Schools Marketing. I'm a judge for their fundraising and marketing awards. And I've just given you that link because I think you'll get these slides afterwards. Alicia, is that right? Will people have access to the slides?
Yes, they will. Yes.
Yeah, cool.
And we're recording the session as well.
Okay, cool. So it's worth it if you want inspiration for some fantastic marketing and fundraising. If you've got a development office, some fantastic examples there. They're the winners that link takes you to. But if you want some inspiration, you can go on there. So that's me done. Just the takeaways, really, that my thoughts before we go to Q&As. Communication is key. I know this isn't grammatically correct, but two-way communication is even more key. I was going to say Kia. Two-way communication is Kia, but I think that would have been even more of a blunder. But two-way communication is so important. Clarity amidst the uncertainty, as being as clear as you can with everything from your finances to your support, to your communications, to your plans for getting back to school. And be aware that priorities are changing. You know, for parents and alumni, their priorities are constantly changing. They're not the same as they were 18 months ago. So for parents, it's the 3 C's: communication, clarity, and care. And for the alumni, I think it's segment, excite and engage. They want to be segmented. We can't always offer the same thing for everyone. Absolutely excite them and absolutely engage them. Crikey, I feel like that's such a whistle-stop tour, Alicia, and I hope I haven't talked too fast.
Oh, Rachel, that was fantastic. And I think it is really useful because I think